And to every panelist, that would be really engaging and really, really inspiring. I feel like I learned a lot. I feel motivated to go out myself and attend all of those programs, and I encourage everyone here to do the same and continue those partnerships. They're really incredible. And I want each of you to tell me how you got your scholarship programs from 4,000 here and there up into these big endowments that you have now, because we want to learn from you. So thank you very much. Let's have one more round of applause. That was a super panel. So continuing on the theme of partnership and collaboration in strengthening the aviation system, our next panel will be led by Jacoby, Lemos, who's our own Senior Vice President of Government Affairs and External Affairs. And he's a trusted leader within the RAA. He has worked really, really hard to protect small community air service access and to help those smaller communities that have fallen off the grid try to find their way back onto it. But he doesn't work in isolation. And today we'll be moderating a panel comprised of some of our partners in doing just that. It's called Strengthening the Regional Airline Ecosystem. And we're going to discuss the strategies for collaboration between airlines and airports and manufacturers and policymakers to make sure that we're not just reconnecting communities, but we're positioning ourselves to capture some of that growth that we talked about earlier today. Drew will introduce his panelists himself, but I'll give a preview now. We have Russo from our friends at Airports Council International North America, airport consultant Sieber, Ross Mitchell from MHIRJ, and our very generous sponsor, Marissa Snow of SkyWest Inc., and Chris Jones from ACI, another sponsor. So please join me in welcoming the panel.
Hey everybody, thank you so much for being here. It's going to be a great panel. Got one more joining us in a second, Chris, but I'm going to kick it off since we're a little short on time. So thank you all for joining us. So as Faye said, we'll explore what actions stakeholders are taking together and separately to support and expand small community air service. As part of that, we'll unpack some of the challenges that have already been brought to light during previous sessions, and share, diagnose those challenges, and then share how we can work together in a collaborative manner to address them and reconnect small communities to the national air transportation system. So as has been discussed, today about 50% of airports have fewer departures than they did pre-pandemic, and despite our best efforts, and there are some green shoots out there, small airports are shouldering the brunt of the losses, as we all know. So we're going to start this panel by digging into that topic a little bit deeper, and we'll begin with Tim, who's our small airports consultant on the panel, and then we're going to go to Marissa after that. As a consultant who's focused on helping small airports attract air service, can you share your perspective on the current air service environment in these small airports?
Sure. It's really rough out there right now. As ATR said, we're seeing 50-seaters be at the end of their life cycle. We're also seeing a shortage of 76-seaters. When we talk to major airlines, one of the things they tell us is the problems with production at Boeing and Airbus are impacting the ability to upgauge markets. So 76-seaters and 70-seaters that were previously thought, they might be available next spring, are not available. We work with about 80 airports across the country. We do work at Atlanta and a few other large ones, but most of our airports are small airports. And probably 8 of our clients right now are airports that have lost all of their scheduled air service since COVID. One airport in particular I work with had 3 airlines and 9 departures pre-COVID. So 1 airline and 1 departure today. Is that better? Okay, good. one thing I would say is that incentives are absolutely, all airlines are asking for incentives. Some airports, it's easier for them to provide than others. I do work, for example, in Atlantic City. Atlantic City has the Southern New Jersey Transportation Authority as their owner. They can literally divert toll road funds to support air service. There's other small, very rural communities that don't have that luxury. So it is extremely difficult. We are competing for a very limited, finite amount of resources, and those resources have become incredibly expensive, as you all are aware, as gauge has increased, pilot salaries has increased, and airport costs have increased. So the economic floor for supporting air service to a small community has really been raised in the last 5 to 7 years.
No, that's great. That's a great perspective. Thanks for sharing. Marissa, of course, SkyWest is an incredibly robust small air service network. Can you share your perspective as an operator?
Yes, we see the demand as strong, maybe as it's ever been in the small and medium-sized airports. As Tim mentioned, there are certainly challenges they face, but the demand is there. We were also at the height of the captain shortage. We had to file termination notices for a large number, about over 2,000 airports. And today, we can say that we are currently flying or have bids in for all but 2 of those. So the green shoots are maybe a little more than shoots. I think demand is really there. The capability is there. And as long as we can work with the airports and the communities and really meet the demand, we see a lot of optimism for small communities as folks really have left kind of urban areas and really want to stay connected to the mass. There's really strong demand.
Does anybody have any points they want to chime in here on?
I feel like you're looking at me.
No, I'm
like
saying
the
I'm
airport
wondering now.
person walking
Chris,
into
yeah,
a room of airline. No, I think certainly the working together piece is really important. And so my compliments to RIA. I saw you the release of your report earlier today, your annual report, and the great data that's in there about the importance of the regionals to the connectivity across the country and to airports of all sizes. That is a key part that I know airports realize. And the working together piece, whether it's on incentives, which airports can't do directly, they have a lot of doing that, but working with communities, and making the case to the communities to sustain service is a really important part. So that working together piece, I think, is really vital moving forward.
So I think, we were talking about small airports wanting to, connect to the wireless. And of course, what they want to connect to is a large hub airport. So, so when a larger airport is thinking through an opportunity to add service, what are the considerations they're working through in terms of the economics, the logistics of making that happen?
So being from a trade association, which you can appreciate, we're always looking at things, usually from an entire industry perspective. So we have an economics department that does a lot of work on looking at the economics of the airport. So let me take a step back before I talk about a specific large hub or service in general, kind of about where airports are and what our economics look like. So we have right now, we just released the study in March, $174 billion in infrastructure needs over the next 5 years. We have $151 billion in debt, which is on average we're paying about $4.4 million a year in debt over 30 years. So when you're looking at a snapshot of an average airport, just on average, that's how we look at things nationally. So of the revenue that airports are bringing in, 45% of that is airport revenue that is self-generated. So things like parking fees, concessions, what we're collecting from you, events, those types of things. That's 45%. But 98% of that is actually going towards operations. So then, of course, everyone's like, okay, well, what about that federal funding? What about PFCs? 20% comes from AIP and PFCs, and that's actually an equal split. It's 10 and 10. And that money is going towards the infrastructure. either paying back bonds by the POC or AIP, pay as you go, paying for projects that are currently going on. We're deriving 30% of our financing from bonds, but again, that has to be paid back. So, that's part of our revenues that we're generating, paying those back, POCs paying those back. So when we're talking about, what are the economics, what's in it for airports, or, there's criticism. Sometimes airports costs are going up, especially at larger airports. There's been a lot of construction going on. We're paying back a lot of debt. We have to pay for it somehow. The federal resources have not, we've gotten an AIP increase, which is amazing, that doesn't pay back bonds. That was great, it was a priority of ours in the last FAA bill, incredibly helpful. Bipartisan infrastructure law funding has helped considerably jumpstart projects. That's coming to an end. PFC has not gone up in 25 years, despite our best efforts. That pays back bonds. So if there's not new money coming into the system, and that is what is driving costs. You have to pay for the infrastructure, you have to pay to operate. And as you all know, your costs are going up, ours are too. So that is a major factor.
Tim, you mentioned it and alluded to it. One way that small airport can kind of get over the hump for expanding service is the partnerships with the communities to provide some incentives to entice the carrier. Do you have any examples of when that's worked well?
Yeah, so we work with communities. In fact, I did 2 last week, I'm doing 2 next week, and they're called community partnership visits, actually. And we kind of lecture the community on, why doesn't the airport manager just go down to the airline store and bring right? First of all, there used to be 12 big ones in this country, and many more hubs than we have today. Basically, we're down to 5 or 6 big ones, and probably, I think we're down to 6 hubs in the last 10 years. So we have to kind of educate the community, and we have to educate the community also that this is just the way it is, and that airlines have a limited number of assets, and those assets are going to be put in the places where it can make money long term. So no matter what the incentives are, the market has to be viable on a long term basis. But B, they're in a risk mitigation game, and so if you want to grow your community and you want to build your economy. Connectivity to the National Air Transportation Network is critical to that. You've got to kind of put your money where your mouth is. It's in the old days, communities used to put money together and build a hospital, or they would build other infrastructure. Air service is a critical part of infrastructure, and the community has to become a participant in it. That's the message that we bring. Now, I will say this: that not all communities have the resources to get that across the finish line, like toll roads, like Southern Jersey Transportation Authority. So what we try to convince communities to do is to leverage their local dollars with, for example, the Small Community Air Service Development Program, where you can go out and take a $200,000 community match and competitively apply for, say, $800,000 in a federal grant. Now you've got $1 million revenue guarantee. Problem is, even that program has declined. When that program was first funded in 2002, it was $20 million, and it's now, I think last year was $8 million. And that's like not even adjusted for inflation, right? And costs have gone up X%, and the program's been cut more than half. So it is a challenge, but communities, I think, are becoming increasingly aware that they have to be part of the solution.
Okay, so we've talked about the economics on airports a little bit. There's also the economics surrounding aircraft and how those fit into our marketplace. And of course, we all know RJs are the right size for small airports, but especially the 50-seat regional jets have gone from being the majority of the industry's fleet to the minority over the last 15 years. So this is a question for both Ross and Chris. What factors do you think are contributing towards the exit of the smallest RJs?
So I'll take the start of that question. If you go back to 2003, 50-seat RJ deliveries peaked, and then they dropped off as quickly as they rose. You go to 2006, and the deliveries were made up of 70 seats and 76 seats. Principal driver to this is CASM, of course, but then the yield mix improves as well. because you have first class, premium, economy, and economy. The downside of that is that you compromise trip cost and the break-even load factor of the aircraft, and so as you move up into the larger categories, there's a vacuum that falls in beneath. The 50-seat RJs have continued to operate, as Alexi mentioned in his presentation earlier on today. The retirement wave for that is coming very quickly. The peak in 2029, it will be 10 years from now, 300 of those 50-seat RJs will disappear. So we know that demand hasn't gone away. In fact, demand can be stimulated as well with the economics of lower-cost aircraft, and so as a manufacturer, it's our responsibility or our contribution to the equation here to bring not only the lowest trip cost, but also the most versatile aircraft in terms of the applicability to business models. So you have the Part 135 business sector, you have the semi-private sector, you have the independent Part 121 operators, and then you have the network carriers, and that's where the versatility of the ATR platform comes in, because you can have 30 seats, you can have 50 seats, and you can have 50 seats in 3-class configuration, and you can have 70 seats as well. So the versatility to apply to the different business models, to offer the lowest trip cost, to help out offset some of the costs of operating into airports in some of these remote communities. If you're saving 30% on a cost per trip basis with an ATR versus an outgoing 50-seat RJ, it's the quickest way to get back into that market that's being indicated.
So let me start by dispelling a myth that I've heard repeated several times today, which is 50-seat aircraft are at the end of their life. They're nowhere near the end of their life. That is a falsehood. The airplanes were built for 80,000 cycles. Most of them are 30, 40,000 cycles today. So they have plenty of life left ahead of them. Yeah, some of them have been taken out of service, but I will tell you, we are doing our forecast. Our forecast is radically different from what you just heard. What is actually happening with CRJ 200 and Embraer 145, so I'll be bipartisan here. The only person in Washington who is bipartisan. So I'll be bipartisan, and I'll tell you 50 seats have stabilized. They've plateaued, and they're actually growing again. And airlines that are creative are bringing 50-seat aircraft back into service and serving small markets. The CRJ 200, the Embraer 145 are the most effective way to serve these markets because they are cheap. You're not paying for them today because you bought them many years ago, you've paid for them already, so the fuel savings you might get, you're going to spend on a new airplane. So that's just, that equation doesn't work. The other thing that the CRJ 200 does really well, and the 145 as well, is it fits in the network. It flies the exact trip time that a 737 or an A320 flies, right? That's vitally important. You don't want to have no regional airline in this room wants to go to the major to say, by the way, I can't hit your bank of departures anymore because my airplane's slower, it can't do the job. That's a problem, right? The reason you saw 50 seats decline were two things. Pilot shortage, which we all lived through and we know, and some routes required greater amenities than the CRJ 200 and 145 could give them. And so the solution for that was the CRJ 550. That wasn't a lower trip cost, that was actually a slightly higher trip cost to capture premium traffic. So trip cost isn't something that you should really focus on when you're focusing on premium traffic. What you should really focus on, what does the job, what does it most effectively and efficiently, and 50 seats do that, right? And if airlines are creative, they can find ways to continue to apply cheap 50 seats into all sorts of markets that are underserved.
All right, Marissa, I'm going back to you, the operator's perspective, putting you right in the middle of it.
Marissa's creative. So.
No, that's why she's up here. I guess what's in terms of there's a fleet transition going on. What is driving it from your perspective? What's happening in terms of at SkyWest in terms of how you guys are trying to serve your markets through?
So a few things that Ross said I very much agree with in terms of the demand for 50 seats is still there, very much. You're not going to see, 100-seater take back out of these markets. But also the drive and transition is a little bit more partners. Passengers are really looking for premium. And so we are seeing really good demand for 550. We're seeing strong demand for that from, we have, an order for 50 more of those from United and more coming from Delta. And it has been well received. If you look at the premium demand and the dual class cabin. But as he also mentioned, we see the CRJ 200 well into the next decade and to be utilized fully through its life. And if we're creative and we're evaluating ways to modernize that cabin a little bit, it has a long life ahead. So very strong demand. 50 seats is going to be a long time product, and the premium product, I think, is something we're going to see ongoing demand for.
Okay.
No, that's great.
Bipartisan?
No,
Tell the truth.
Yeah, no. But I mean, that's it. MHIRJ, SkyWest, MHIRJ announced a partnership.
Yep.
To bring a new aircraft to the market. Of course, we've heard all about great aircraft that ACI wants to bring online. So there's a discussion here about what characteristics do the next gen aircraft need to have in order to be successful in the future. So, say we can't find some more bipartisan agreement here. Quickly, what do you think those characteristics need to be in terms of how you're developing and trying to get a new aircraft to market?
Sure. In terms of a new aircraft, I think there's a few things that are important. And the Maeve aircraft will build all of this in. I think, A, it has to fit within the new network structure. So it has to be able to fly the speeds of the current 175 CRJ aircraft. It just has to be able to be in that. It has to improve the passenger experience from what we get today. Right? So it has to be better. And the Maeve aircraft will do that because it's going to be 5 abreast. It'll be the first 5 abreast aircraft in the regional space. And so it will be able to position larger bins. It'll be very much akin to, I'm going to say the C Series, because that's what it still is to me, but it will be very similar to the C Series in terms of what it will deliver. And then it also must deliver lower maintenance costs and lower fuel burn. And it has to do that in part because all the other costs are shooting up, right? So it needs to deliver that for the future. A future-proof airplane has to provide better comfort, better efficiency, and fit in the network. And so the airplane will fly at Mach 0.75. It'll fly at flight level 350. So it will give you exactly the same experience that you would get today on a 76 or a 50-seat jet, but with better efficiency. It gives you the sustainability that passengers will ask for in the future. I think you need all of those things. Those are the building blocks that you have to put together to have regional continue to expand. And by the way, we think this airplane is not only a very good 76-seat solution, but it will be a 550 replacement in the future. In 2033, as CRJ 200s are finally starting to get old, then it will be the replacement.
I'm going to agree and partly disagree with my friend Russo. So where I agree is on the need for superior economics. I think we were both aligned on that. And I think our platform today delivers superior economics to the aircraft that it's competing against. Second thing we need is a technology roadmap. So at ATR, as Alexi mentioned earlier on, we have a new hybrid electric engine that we'll be flying on a test bed by 2029, with the EVO platform coming middle of next decade. And so we're future-proofing the aircraft that we have today. Where I will disagree is on the speed and the network. The ATR is not trying to be something to everybody. In fact, it brings superior economics below 400 nautical miles. That's the sweet spot for the aircraft. The majority of flights today are all happening below 400 nautical miles. If you go to the northeast, the airspace is congested. My flight into Reagan was delayed. We're put into a holding pattern. ATC, as we heard this morning, is not necessarily taking advantage of the speed of the aircraft. You are driven by ATC and your speed into the airport. And so I would challenge that that is actually a necessity in the regional space. We're not necessarily driven by speed. To stimulate these markets in the 50-seat segment, it is all going to be down to economics. And that's where I think you talk about a larger aircraft. A A larger aircraft in this space is competing against the EMB 175 and the 170, and to some extent the CRJ 550. But in terms of comfort, the comfort afforded by the ATR versus the CRJ 200 or CRJ 550, at every point in measurement in the cross-section we're bigger. So we are an upgrade in passenger experience from the cabin onboard experience standpoint, and then when you have the forward passenger door as well, we're neutralizing the argument that has been held against us for quite some time that we don't have the same passenger boarding experience. We're changing that, we're moving forward, we're bringing new technology. We have a modular avionics suite that has precision approach to give greater access to airports, more direct routing, and that's something that you don't have in the existing generation of aircraft in the CRJ 200, for example. So our technology is there, and it is evolving at the same time with the platform.
So I think the question was what you need in the future, and Chris straight back to the present. So I'll talk a little bit about the present here, which you know, the CRJ, compared the ATR to the CRJ 550. So I'll say, look, the CRJ 550 consistently scores as the second highest passenger experience in the United network. I hear that directly from folks who are operating the airplane. So it is a very comfortable airplane. It's well positioned for the passengers. So I don't think you're going to beat it with an aircraft like a turboprop. I sold turboprops. I know the passenger perception of turboprops. It would be difficult to beat a 550 with a turboprop. But speed does matter, because the longer you are on a route, on an average 400 nautical mile route, you're going to spend 20 minutes longer. That's 20 minutes more with the pilot that you're paying for. And if you add that up over a day, it means one rotation goes away, which means you need more airplanes to do the same number of routes. I can't imagine what the scope issue may be if you're trying to fit more airplanes in. So I think, you know, when you think about it, it will be a jet market. It is a jet market today. It will always be a jet market.
All right, so I'm going to have to I'm going to say way off media service for a second, because there are other spaces we have to collaborate, and we have to collaborate on safety. I think one of the points in previous panels that's been held repeatedly is that small airports, in many instances, are at a disadvantage when it comes to investment in ATC technologies. And in order to get that solved, and address the issues that are popping up, collaboration is absolutely key. And unfortunately, FAA, as Amy talked about, has an extensive backlog of ATC investments. Airports have an extensive backlog of their own investments. And so we have to find creative solutions to solving the problems where they're popping up. And Marissa, this is going to be a little more gentler question for you, then we'll put you in the middle of others. You've experienced these challenges, of course, at your home airport in St. George, Utah. You've had some success tackling the problem. So can you share with all of us how you went about it and the tools you employed to get the job up?
Yeah, so St. George Airport is one of those non-towered airports that Jim mentioned earlier this morning, that many that we fly into. As demand has really exploded post-COVID, it's become more and more evident. It's also a very highly GA-utilized airport, and that is a safety risk. It is a genuine safety risk. And as we've started to resume flights and frequencies, you know, the airport and the collaboration we've had with St. George Airport has really been focused on the safety need to get a tower, get the FAA to approve a tower, get the funding necessary to get it done. As everyone has talked about, that is not a quick or easy journey. And so working together with St. George Airport, we've been able to provide safety data, takeoff data, economic even data. For example, when we resumed our service to Los Angeles from St. George, we sat at the end of the runway for 20 minutes with the engines running while a GA aircraft did touch and goes to get them out of our way because we have no tower. So, you know, things like that, we were able to give tangible data to the airport as they made their arguments to lawmakers to get the funding, the $15 million needed from the state to actually get the tower. And as of last month, they have officially broken ground, and we are on our way to having a tower in next year's course. There's always, you know, towers are not the full solution to get everybody actually communicating, but it's a huge step in the right direction, and it really came about in partnership with the airport and the airline.
That's awesome. I think we're short on time, so with that, we're going to end it on that very positive note. So everybody join me in thanking our panel today.
Thank you all. And I want to thank that last panel again. That was excellent. And I think it goes to show that, as we talked about this morning, that we do have a lot of rivalry, but what's fascinating is how we come together for the greater good of aviation. So we may not agree on every point, but we all do agree that Drew is an excellent moderator. and Marissa took that question wonderfully. Thank you all for a great program so far. Next up is one of our most popular elements. We will be doing the CEO walkthrough just right next door. But if you're not a CEO and you want to visit the booths, please push those CEOs out of the way. But please do make your way through and talk to the supply company partners that will keep us going. And we will be back here in 1 hour's time at 4 o'clock to begin our next panel. Thank you.
Well,